Hello everybody, this is Danny from Deep South Homestead on my porch time today. Been giving a lot of thought to this porch time. I'm going back looking at a lot of the comments that are made to me, a lot of private messages that are made to me. And when I first started this channel, it was all about getting to know people and creating a community, getting to know your neighbors, and I kind of want to get back to that a little bit on this particular porch time about getting to know your neighbors. Now, in order to do that, we've got to be a neighbor. And as I begin to think about that, I begin to think about the different ones in my life that I've been a part of as far as neighbors is concerned. And what brought this all back up, I've been watching Patera on Appalachia Homestead as she's doing this living frugally type thing that she's doing there, and she happened to mention two people on that channel that kind of struck home with me. And that was Mrs. Homestead and old Mr. Fred that lives down the road, neighbors. And she began to talk about how that she's a neighbor to them and they're a neighbor to her. She takes them things down, some food and stuff, and they give her cantaloupes and watermelons. And you know, really, people, that's what it's really all about. It's all about getting to know your neighbor, and that's what I want to this porch time today to be a little bit about, because this kind of struck home with me and it's kind of I guess it's kind of sending me back to where I originally was at when I started this. Now I want to take today and I want to talk about how some of the people on my YouTube channel have been good neighbors to us. There was one, we went to the post office this morning because we had to mail a bunch more stuff off where people's ordered some things, so we went to town to do that. And when we went by the post office, there was a package in the post office. Well, we got it out, and we wasn't expecting a package from anybody. But the name on it, I recognize the name because I've seen them on our channels quite often, and that was Mark at Sunbird Farm. I couldn't imagine what would even be in that package. And as I began to open it up, I pulled it out. I still didn't know really what it was because it was closed up, and I handed it to Wanda and I began to read the note. And Mark made a comment in there about, he said, "Danny, I know you love to hunt. So I've custom made, I have handmade you something here that I want you to have. And not only did I make something for you, I made something for Wanda also." And he did it with a lei. Now, I'm going to tell you people something. Mark, based on the craftsmanship of the two products that he sent to us, is a master with a lei. Now, I'm going to show you these two products, and I'm amazed. I will never use them. I'm just going to tell you, they will never be put out to be used. These will be keepsakes for me. These will be kept the rest of my life. Me and Wanda have decided that these will be keepsakes for us because they are so special to us. We're not going to just destroy them by using them. And I have them right here in my pocket. And what it is, if I can get close enough to the thing here, we're going to put two pictures up here and let you look at them. There's two different pens. Now, these pens were turned out on a lei. Wanda's is made out of persimmon. I'm telling you, I'm amazed at the beauty of this pen. Now, I'm going to put a picture up here and let you see this pen up close, so that you kind of get an idea of the craftsmanship that Mark put into this pen. Now, the pen that Mark sent me, he said, because Danny, I know you love to hunt. Now this pen has a ammunition cartridge for the lower part of it. I can't quite tell if it's a 270 or 7 mag, maybe a 30-06. It's one of the bigger caliber bullets right here. Still got the point on it. It's amazing to me how he did that. The top part of this pen has been turned on a lay out of a deer antler. And then on the back side of it for the clip, if I turn it around, I know you're not going to be able to see it with the camera, but I'm going to show you a picture here in just a minute. The back side of that, the clip, is an actual gun. Now, to me, that's putting thought into something. And when someone puts that much thought into something, to me, that will be a keepsake for me. And I will probably pass this on down to my kids. And y'all have to understand that I'm one of these kind of people that I've never had anybody give me anything. I've always been a giver. I've always been successful enough in my business and different things that I've done that I was always the one who was doing the giving. And now that I'm disabled and not able to get out and work anymore and hold my job and stuff, people have started giving to me, and it's a new feeling for me. It's something that's a little bit overwhelming. And now I know how all those people I used to give to, I know how they felt. Mark, I want to tell you, brother, I really appreciate this. Wanda and I appreciate this so much. These will be keepsakes for us. As a matter of fact, she's already asked me if I would build a shadow box to put in the house to display these. And we're going to put your name in that. And when I get it built, I'll put it on YouTube and I'll show the box. I'm going to put that they were made by you and that they were a gift to Deep South Homestead to me and Wanda. I just, I can't say thank you enough. I really, my heart's just moved by this. I don't actually know what to say other than just thank you so much for that, Mark. I'm going to put it back in my pocket here, close it up. But people, that's what I'm talking about as far as being a neighbor. Now in the scriptures, the disciples asked the Lord, which is the greatest commandment? And Christ, in Matthew 22, verses 36 through 40, told them that the two greatest commandments, the first was, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and your might. And that the second one was likened to the first one, to love your neighbor as yourself. Do we even do that anymore? Do we love our neighbors like we love ourselves? You know, that's something that I think we have lost in this country. Because I guarantee you most people don't even know who their neighbors are anymore. But you know, it did not stop there with Christ. Christ made another statement in Scripture. John 13:34. Christ said, I give you a new commandment. Now this is not the 10 commandments. This is a new commandment. And that is to love one another as I have loved you. Now my friend, that takes it to a whole new level. He said of the other commandments, the greatest one was to love your neighbor as yourself. But to love one another, Christ said, as I have loved you. Now Christ loved us unconditionally. Literally, there's no strings attached. He gave his life for us, even though we were just rotten sinners. There's no greater love, the Scripture says, than a man lay down his life for his friend. And that's what Christ did for us. So there's no greater love than that. So if we're to love one another, and this being a new commandment, Christ says, as I have loved you, then where have all the good neighbors gone? I want to talk about a few neighbors that's been in my life. I've had several people on my channel say, Danny, could you tell us some stories about some things that's happened in your life? Well, I'm going to tell y'all a few, and it has to do with neighbors. When I moved out here where I live at, this road I moved on to is an extremely long road. It's several miles long. There's 7,000 acres behind me that there's nothing but just woods, and there's like, I don't know, it's like almost 5,000 on the other side of the road that there's just woods. And on this road, I love this place because there was just virtually nobody on it. It was like I was back in the wilderness in here. So I drove down this road and I looked at it, and I went back home and I prayed about it, and I came back to this place again. And as I was driving down the road, I saw an old real estate sign sticking in the woods, almost faded out. So I pulled over and I got out and I went and got the old real estate sign, and I could make out a phone number on it. I wrote that phone number down. I went home and I called that number. Well, I got a hold to a lady who used to be a realtor. I asked her about the property. Did she know anything, remember anything about the property? And she told me, she said, yes, I do. She said, we had it up for sale for quite some time. No one ever purchased it. So people just pulled it off the market. And I asked her, did she remember who the land belonged to? And she told me that she did. So I went and called those people. Well, it was two elderly ladies. They were in their 90s. And as I sat and talked to them, this land they used to work when they were just small kids. It was land that their daddy had homesteaded. It'd been in their family for over 100 years. And I thought, wow, that's amazing. You know, the family, the land's still in the families for that period of time. And I asked them, did they mind if I tried to look at it and if they'd be willing to sell a piece of it. And they told me that to just look at it, and if I saw something I wanted, to let them know. So I went by the courthouse and I printed off a map, because I used to run landlines for a company and mark timber and do different things. I knew how to run landlines. And so I went down to a particular point on the road where the landline crossed the old blacktop road. And I looked up on the hill, and there was an old wooden frame house sitting up there with an old dairy barn that was all growed up around it. And I pulled over on the side of the road there and got out with my map. And I began to walk across the road and look at where the line crossed the road at, and it was extremely thick everywhere. And trying to find on the map exactly where I was, make sure I was at the right place. And as I kept looking at that old dairy barn, out the corner of my eye, I noticed every now and then I'd see some movement up there. And as I made my way back across the road to my truck, where I could get behind the truck and actually look through the glass and see, where I'd had time to look without actually seeing somebody staring at me, or me staring at them, should I say, I looked and there was a gun barrel pointing out the window of that dairy barn. And it would move every now and then. So I knew there was somebody in that dairy barn. So right quick like, I decided maybe I'm trespassing, and maybe I need maybe I just need to leave. And I kind of stood there a few more minutes behind my truck, looking through the glare of the window, and all of a sudden the gun barrel was gone. Then I asked myself the question, did I imagine this? So I stood a few minutes longer, and as I did, I saw a door open on the back side of the dairy barn, and out stepped an old man wearing overalls, toting a gun. He started walking in my direction, so I was not knowing exactly what to do. I just stood there, and I said, well, Lord, if I've done something wrong, I'll just have to apologize to this gentleman. And as he walked up, I walked over to the fence and stretched my hand out to shake his hand, and he reached across the fence to shake my hand. And I told him, I said, sir, I hope I'm not trespassing. I said, and if I have, I apologize. I'm just trying to, I have a map here that I'm interested in purchasing a piece of property out this way. and I'm just trying to look at some landlines. And if I'm on your property, I'm sorry. And he just kind of smiled at me, and he said, son, you don't have anything to worry about. He said, that old dairy barn up there is what I sit in. He said, where you parked your truck is where the deer cross the road at. And he said, I just come down here every now and then, and one crosses the road, I shoot him. And he said, so don't let that bother you. You're not trespassing. That's not my land. That is the people's land that you're looking at. And he said, he said, I've been here for quite some time. And he said, it'd be good to have a new neighbor out here. He said, do you mind if I just take you around and show you the best pieces of the whole property? And they were like 260 something acres of this land. And I thought, wow. I said, man, if you'd be willing to do that for me, I sure would appreciate it. So he unloaded his gun and crawled over the fence and got in the truck with me and told me where to go. And we drove through the woods, all through the woods everywhere. And he told me, he said, I really think the best piece of property on the whole thing is the one that joins me. And I thought to myself, I said, most people would try to get you as far away from them as they could. But this old man said the best piece is the piece that joined him. And as I looked at it, and we got out of the truck and we walked around through the woods, he was telling the truth. Because I believe, and now after living here for 20-something years, I know that it was the best piece of property. So I shook his hand and told him thank you, and I took him back to his house and dropped him off, and I went back to the two old ladies and I made a deal with them, and I purchased the land. I didn't purchase the whole 260. I purchased part of it, but not all of it. And as time would go on, I began to build me a 2-story house on the property, and well, old Mr. Leo would come over every time he heard me over there working. He'd come over to check on me. Because you see, old Mr. Leo was a construction guy himself. And he was kind of more or less just checking on to see if I was building it the right way. And as I'd work, he'd squat down out there and he'd tell me stories. He'd tell me, son, now don't get too hot. Take your time. He said, I watched my daddy one time get too hot and he fell off of a roof, and from that point on my daddy could never work again. He said, my daddy always told me, he said, son, when you get tired and you get hot, stop. He said, if they fire you, then go get you another job because your health is not worth it. And I've never forgot that from Mr. Leo. He was the kind of man that he said, you know what? Whatever I own is yours now, friend. If you need anything, just come get it. And if it's never not at my house, I'm just going to assume that you have it. Just return it in the way you found it. And me and Mr. Leo became the best of friends. And the reason I knew he was a good neighbor is one day I looked out in my yard and I saw a dog there. I hadn't been there very long. I saw a dog in my yard, and I called Mr. Leo and asked him, I said, Mr. Leo, do you own a dog? And he said, yes, I do. He said, I own a black and white dog. Her name is Queenie. It's a female. She's been fixed. I said, okay. I said, I just seen a dog in my yard, and I just wanted to make sure that if it was yours or if it was just a stray. Well, as time went on, a week or so, I went over to his house and I was sitting around, and I noticed, I said, well, Mr. Leo, where's your dog at? He said, well, son, he said, I had Queenie for about, I forget, I seemed like it was somewhere around 10 or 12 years. He said, I got rid of her. And I said, well, I guess her being old like that. He said, no. He said, it didn't have anything to do with being old. He said, she went to your house. And he said, I don't want any problems between me and a neighbor. A neighbor's more important to me than the dog was. He said, so I got rid of the dog before the dog become a problem between you and I. And I thought about that, and I said, you know what? That's a real neighbor. Because he loved his fellow neighbor like Christ loved us. And as time would go on, I would meet the other two neighbors, because there was only 3 neighbors on this whole road, and all of them were older men. Old Mr. Sam, you could hear him coming when he turned off the blacktop road. The old 3-speed on the column shift pickup he had, he'd run it wide open in first gear and go from first gear to third gear. He wouldn't even go to second. And then you'd hear it banging and clunking as it come along, driving about 20 miles an hour, bucking and jumping and coming down the road. Mr. Sam had a totally different personality and humor of his own. He came by and he saw the house I was building, and he said, "Neighbor," he said, "I want to tell you, we're probably going to have to burn you out." I didn't know the man from Adam. Did not actually know how to take what he said. And then he kind of smiled. And he said, "No," he said, "I'm just joking with you." He said, "We always tell people we don't want anybody out here with a house bigger and finer than ours." He said, "We all just live in old houses." And he said, "It's just a joke, son. Glad to have you as a neighbor." So me and Mr. Sam become real good friends. I could always tell when he turned off the road up there when I heard his old truck coming down the road. He'd come by every so often and check on me. Sit around and tell me a few old stories. And then the third man, Mr. Charles, lived a little bit further down the road. He came by when I was building my house, and all I did was took a chainsaw and cut down enough trees to get the house placed. Just place big enough for the house. There were trees all up against the porch and against the side of the house. I cut down just enough trees and cleared the land just enough to get the house in there. And Mr. Charles come by and he pulled up and he got out and he said, "Son," he said, "I'm glad to have you as a neighbor. I want to introduce myself. I'm Mr. Charles." He said, "I work in the oil field business. I fly in and out of Venezuela all the time. Any way I can help you?" And I told him, I said, "Well, Mr. Charles, I appreciate that. I'm glad to know you here, and I'm glad to know you." I said, "But right now, all I'm doing is just trying to build me a house." And he said, "Well, come on, let's just walk and talk for a minute." So we walked out there by the truck and the road, and he said, "Have you thought about a garden?" And I told him, I said, "Yes, sir." I said, "I walked the property over," and I said, right out, I showed him a place on the property there. I said, I get the money, I'm going to take a dozer and I'm going to try to push this off and get me a garden here." And I showed him another little spot. I said, "I'm going to put a fruit orchard over there. And I'm going to put me a little pen here behind the house to have me some chickens, and a little place over there I want to get me some pigs and maybe a cow or two in that little lot area right there. Get me a corral built." And he said, "Well, I don't want to take your time up because I know I don't believe in keeping a man from work." So he left. I didn't think anything more about it. I went home that evening after I worked on the house and went on back to my job the next day, because all I did was work in late in the evenings or either on the weekends, mostly on my house, because I lived somewhere else and I had to drive to my place here to work. I didn't get to come that weekend because of circumstances that had arose, so I came back during the week the next week, and when I drove up, all those places that I showed Mr. Charles, somebody had brought a dozer in and already cleared and pushed all that and leveled it all up and just cleaned it up real nice. It was ready to garden. At the moment, I didn't really know who done it because it didn't dawn on me. But as I worked on the house, a little later, I heard an old pickup truck coming, and Mr. Charles drove up and he got out and he said, "Son," he said, "I hope I got it right." He said, "Did I get it just like you want it? Because if I didn't, I'll come back and make it like you want it." And I told him, I said, "Mr. Charles, I don't know why you done it." I said, I told you when I was looking at it, I didn't have the money to pay anybody." And he said, "Son, neighbors don't charge neighbors." He said, "Neighbors help neighbors." He said, "You would do the same for me if you had the equipment, because I can look at your personality and tell. Welcome to the neighborhood." And from that point on, these 3 gentlemen become real inspirational mentors in my life. And starting today, I have that same opportunity in my life after I'm an older man now. I have a woofer coming today. He's a young boy from Mexico. I've known his dad for quite some years. I've known his grandmother. I work for them. They have a place here in the States. This young boy is Hungarian and American. living in Mexico, been there all of his life. And his dad had come by to talk to me, and the boy came with him. And while he was here, we were talking about getting a woofer, because Wanda and I have been praying hard about woofers, trying to locate the right one. And the boy turned and looked at me. He's about 18 and 19 years old. And he said, "Mr. Danny, can I be a woofer and learn from you?" And as tears filled my eyes, I told him, I said, "Son, it's up to your parents and you." And he looked at his dad, and his dad said, "How do I sell my son to you?" And he said, "We'll have to talk to his mother." Well, he talked to his mother, and his mother encouraged him to come do this. So y'all pray for me, because God has given me somebody to mentor, and He's also given me a young guy to be a woofer. That's from people that we know, not somebody we don't know coming into our place here. Just pray that God will give me the wisdom to teach this young man, just like these other men in my life took their time to teach me. And if you don't get anything else out of porch time today, it's what Christ said: love one another as I've loved you, and do it unconditionally. That's my chat for porch time today. Thank y'all from Deep South Homestead.